It's important to question the way you see the world, and why is that the way that you see the world? Why do you see that scenario different to how someone else sees it? Why do you enter a room and feel anxious when some people enter the room and feel confident? When you really think about it, like, why do we perceive the world different to others? And this questioning is really important, because everything in life that we go through is interpreted through our own stories that we tell ourselves. We have this idea of who we are. I am Alex Rogers, who is anxious but then confident in these scenarios, who struggles with procrastination but then can stay consistent in the gym. And I've got these mental narratives, these stories that have been accumulated from all my past experiences and my interpretations of them, and they lead me forward through a lens of projection. So now I go into a room and say there's a pretty girl there, or there's people that make me anxious, and all of a sudden I get the physiological effects of social anxiety. But this is only because I've got a story about that room, about that person, that is linked to past experiences that are bringing up these feelings of anxiety. And the more you can get clear on these stories, the more you can become aware of them, understand them, the better chance you have of deprogramming them, and the better chance you have of creating new stories moving forward that are more aligned with your purpose, that are more aligned with the person you want to be and the goals you want to achieve. But it all starts with that awareness of the stories. There's a lot of internal work that it takes to overcome the feelings of social anxiety or depression or lack of self-confidence. It's really that thing, what the mind believes the body can achieve. It kind of sounds really cringy. It sounds kind of like the law of attraction. But if you really do start telling yourself mental narratives that you can go out and achieve things, and then you act in accordance with that and get results and start putting in the work, then your identity is going to shift to someone who does them things, and it's going to be easier to act in accordance with that. There's two ways to build up these stories in a productive manner. It is to understand why you see the world in a negative manner in the first place. Why do you see the world through an anxious lens? Is it because some past experiences? Is it because you've had evidence that you don't communicate well with people? Really figure out why do I see the world like this? And you can do this through meditation, journaling, a lot of internal work. And then the next thing is to go out and disprove these stories. This is the basics of exposure therapy. Go out and test these stories. Go out and speak to people. And the more you do things, the more you overcome these negative stories and the fears that are instilled in them, the more evidence you're going to get that you're someone who can talk, can communicate, can be confident around women. And your identity is going to catch up with that. Your identity catches up with the evidence that you portray it. But then you also need to be careful the way you perceive this evidence. So you could have massive social anxiety. I'm going to keep coming back and anchoring this conversation to social anxiety, because I think it's the most relatable to me, and it's the most hopefully relatable to the people that are listening, because I think everyone gets social anxiety in different ways. So say you've got a lack of self-confidence about yourself around women. Then you go into a scenario that makes you anxious, you get a little bit afraid of the way you come across, you think you act weird, your hands are in and out your pockets, but you go and speak to an attractive girl anyway, and you have a conversation with her, and then you walk away. The way you frame and context that exposure is going to determine how it went. So if you did and ah a little bit, and you got a little bit anxious and you said something weird and the conversation didn't go very well, be careful how you frame that interaction, because if you can frame that interaction in a way that's, that was me overcoming my fears. Look, I just had a conversation with her and this happened, and there was definitely things I could have improved on, but I overcame a bit of a fear. You're going to build up momentum through that. But if you frame that scenario as, I should have said this, why didn't I say that? She's going to think I'm weird. And you start cultivating all these negative outlooks on that one interaction, then that's going to build up in your mind as evidence that you are the person who is anxious around women. When really it's just a flip on perspective. You can just flip the perspective to look at the positives and focus on the positives. I'm not saying be blind to where you can improve, because that's important in itself. Where you can improve are often indicators on skills that you can acquire to build more confidence later on. But the narrative that we tell ourselves about the experiences is so important, and it's going to dictate how you act, how you behave, the results you get, which are going to further produce better results. So it works in a cycle. It's like the story you tell yourself, the action you take. The story you tell yourself about that action, and then the greater action you take. And it keeps compounding, and momentum builds up in either direction, negative or positive. So you might as well look at things positively, because it's going to affect the way you behave and the way you act. These stories are really interesting, how they've been accumulated over the years. And it's often just a reflection of yourself. The way we see is the way we are. So if you see the world in an anxious way, if you're constantly alert, and if you're constantly afraid of life, if you've got a fear of life, that is because you've got inherent fear inside of you of your own inadequacies. That you're not good enough to achieve these things. That you're not good enough to go out and get a new job. You're not good enough to go and be successful. You're not good enough to do this or do that. So you see the fear of life. You don't try things, you hide from things, because you have the inherent belief about yourself that you are that person. And the best way to do that, honestly, is exposure. Just go out and expose yourself to new scenarios. It's that quote from Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. It's crazy. Once you do go out and expose yourself to the things that you're scared of, or if you go out and do things that you wouldn't normally do, you see how well you adapt to these things, and you start overcoming these self-limiting beliefs, these self-doubts that you have about yourself. You start chipping away at them one by one. Let's say for me, for example, I've got a lot more confident at speaking to women now. Like I rarely, still have a little bit of anxiety pop up here and there, but I'm very confident in being myself. I'm a lot more better in conversations with people. And this first started by when I had like massive social anxiety. I was working in Morrison's at the time, and I used to see people from like Newquay or people I knew, and I used to run away. Like I literally used to like go and hide in the chiller because I couldn't talk to them, because I thought that they were going to judge me for working in Morrison's, and they were going to see that I dropped out university and that now I'm socially anxious and I'm not the person they probably think I am. So I used to just go and hide in the freezer or the chiller. And when I started overcoming this was when I started going and approaching them regardless of how I felt. And meditation helps with this massively, because I was meditating. There was a little gap between how I was feeling and like this mindfulness gap. I could detach away from the feelings of anxiety for 1 second. And in that 1 second between stimulus and response, I could make a choice to go and approach that person. And then through that, I would get the massive feelings of social anxiety. Like I'd be in a conversation with someone and like I completely lose control. Like I wouldn't be able to talk to people. My hands would be sweating. I'd be saying weird things. My voice would start cracking. I'd start umming and ahhing. But then I would force myself to sit in that conversation. And after like the first 10 seconds of that happening, I would start to calm down. I would listen to them. And then I'd be in the conversation. I was slowly building up evidence that I am the person who can talk, because I went up and talked to someone. And so this started compounding. I slowly started getting more confidence and more ability to talk to people. And then that barrier of not wanting to talk to them got shorter and shorter. The anxiety that would come up in a conversation got shorter and shorter. It got less important to me. And then I started building up another identity of someone that can go out and communicate. And whilst I was doing this, I was doing a lot of journaling, a lot of deep work, like, why do I see the world in this way? Why do I see the world as an anxious person? And then you get into a lot of your past traumas. You get into a lot of, I see the world because this happened in my childhood, or this happened to me, or that happened to me. And a good way to like figure this stuff out is to like constantly ask yourself why. Like, say if you've got anxiety around someone, go home and be like, why did I get anxiety around that person? And you might come up with an answer and then question yourself why again, and constantly start being inquisitive about why you see the world in this way. The stories we tell ourselves will dictate the way we live life and dictate the results of our life. So it's crucial that you pay attention to these. People live life on autopilot where they just live out these stories without ever paying attention to anything, without being aware of where their life's going or where they want to go. And they just live in this perpetual state of acting out the narratives that they're telling themselves. Because our perception shapes our reality. There is an inherent reality out there that I'm guessing is just the universe. It's what's happening, and the only way we perceive that reality is through the lens of everything we've ever experienced. So we're all seeing the world in different ways. And so if you really think about it, when you get social anxiety, or if you get depression, or if you're not taking the right action on the things that are happening, the things that you want in life, you need to start telling yourself better stories. You need to start cultivating different stories about yourself and moving in the right direction. So that's all I've got to say, people. It was a nice short one today. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'll see you all in the next episode.